Good morning. Good morning, Cornell family. Speaking of family, I actually have my New York parents who are here in the audience, so I have to say good morning, Mom. Good morning, Daddy. Very happy that you're here. So I graduated Cornell in 1985, which is an exceptionally long time ago. But I've got to tell you, since we are family, I'm going to keep using it, Scott, that it was absolutely the best decision I ever made for my career to go to Cornell. And the crazy thing is that my whole life, my father, my mentor, had always programmed Harvard. He's double Harvard. I was going to go there. I was the good girl in high school who went with a friend up as she was going to apply for early decision. I had the weekend of my life and changed my application and got in early decision to Cornell. And from the first day I got there to the last, I started to dread the last day I would have there. And it was really critical in terms of planting those early entrepreneurial seeds. So I'm going to start a little bit about my background, then I'm going to go into sort of the road rules of entrepreneurialism. Everybody has a different way of saying it. So I was a history and a government major at Cornell. Computer science, that was not an option. Computer science at Cornell in 1981 was in the electrical engineering school, and you were programming mainframes. So when I went to arts and sciences, there were majors like econ and anthropology and sociology and English and government. And those were the things that I thought were like super important. And at the end of the day, what I tell young people all the time is don't go to trade school. And certainly don't go to Cornell to go to a trade school. Go to Cornell because at the end of the day, if you take a liberal arts background, you're going to learn to grasp abstractions in a way that no one could ever teach you in a marketing course or a business course or an advertising course. You're going to debate the impossible. You're going to look at patterns that occurred in history at scale. And you'll then have to go in your professional life and actually examine very similar patterns, but no one's going to teach you that in an advertising course. You're going to learn a level of written and verbal advocacy for things that seemingly don't matter and that people don't understand, and that's what it's like to do a startup. And so in many ways, that training became the foundation of my entrepreneurial time. And at Yahoo, we have, the last year, we don't call it a turnaround, we call it a renaissance. It's true. We're not a gang, we're a club. But one of the things that we've done in my organization, I run worldwide marketing and customer experience. So all the people that answer the phones, that do the social listening, not just the branding and the marketing and the advertising, the things, report into my org. And when we started thinking about Marissa Mayer, my boss and good friend, actually started a very famous program at Google, which was about creating these future associates. It was a training program, and we've done the same thing at Yahoo. And we had our first class, and I did not hire a single trade school graduate. I picked 4 schools, of course, Cornell at the top of the list. And we hired econ majors and anthropology majors and English majors and history majors. And the performance that they have at Yahoo right now on their first day at work is as good in some departments as a senior manager. So don't teach your kids to be cowboys. Brief little thing about my career trajectory. I've done 2 startups in my life. I graduated into the worst recession probably since this one. 1985, I sent out 64 resumes and cover letters. I got 1 interview for a job offer in an ad agency for $12,000, $500. I eventually went into the agency business and started my first startup at 30. It was an integrated marketing firm where I focused on young companies, all startups, 110 startups in the time that I had it, and then turnarounds. So companies in Chapter 11 and Chapter 7. And the differences between startups and turnarounds are very small. You have to have a maniacal focus on your customers. You have to take risks in a way because there may not be tomorrow. You have to constantly be listening. And those things motivated me. I sold my company in 2000 to IPG, a big company that owns a lot of little companies, and went to Amazon, who had been a client, where I ran marketing and communications. From there, I went to American Eagle, where I did similar things, plus running e-commerce. I did my second startup, which was funded by Kleiner Perkins and Liberty Media, called Lockers. Whole new idea. The idea, we were sort of Pinterest before Pinterest, an idea that came a little too soon, and I'm going to talk about some of the lessons learned there. And then when Marissa came to me right when she took the job at Yahoo, I went to the world's largest startup, and that is Yahoo. And we really see ourselves as the world's largest startup. So I'm going to get into sort of the 10 road rules of what we're all about, not just at Yahoo, but what I've found through now. I think if I graduated in 1985, I'm looking at, geez, it's not pretty. I'm looking at 28 years of entrepreneurialhood. So I'm going to start with sort of my 10 road rules. And the first one, which I think is really important, is the notion of finding your why. So many people start a company, it starts like this. 2 really smart engineers or 2 really smart product people have something they're playing with, and it's really cool. And then they say, hey, maybe this is a product. And then they say, hey, this product is okay. I wonder who could use this product. And then they get money, and they say, hey, I wonder how we can make money from it. It's probably a weird way of creating a lasting company, in my mind. It's counterintuitive. What you really have to do is find your why. Why should you exist? Why should you take not just $1 of a venture capital's money, but a second of your own time? And just as a hint, that why can't be to make money, to have an exit, to be the Pinterest for Pekingese dog owners. I mean, you don't want that. You want to find a white space. You want to find an opportunity or something that really irks a group of customers or consumers. You want to find a world problem that you want to solve. But you should find it, and you should determine your why, write it down, and look at it every morning when you get into work or before you turn on an electronic. I like to use the example James Carville in 1992 and 1991 and 1992, when he started with the Clintonian campaign. He had a why for his whole campaign. And I don't know how many of you remember, but the line was, it's the economy, stupid. And it was on everyone's computer. So they could remember that the reason that Bill Clinton was running for president in 1992 was because he thought the economy needed fixing, and he had a plan to fix it. At Yahoo, this was the very first thing we did when I got to Yahoo in September of 2012. We had been plagued, quite frankly, with more stories about our changes in CEOs, CMOs, and head of sales than we had about our products. And people were saying, what are you? Are you a search company? Are you a ads company? Are you a media company? And the truth is, when you think about great companies like Apple, does anybody ever say to Apple, are you a phone company? Are you a music company? No, they're an innovation company. Their why is to think differently and to innovate for the world. My classic joke about Apple is if they came out with a healthcare plan tomorrow, I'd probably look at it, not because I think they are a healthcare plan company, but because I think they make things better and more innovative and more consumer friendly. So at Yahoo, the first thing we had to do was find our why. And what we determined very quickly is our why is to make the world's daily habits inspiring and entertaining. And the important part about that is daily habits. So Yahoo has become famous from its very founding from making the internet a daily habit. It wasn't my old boss, Jeff Bezos. It wasn't Sergey and Larry. It wasn't Steve Jobs. It was David Filo and Jerry Yang who took this wonky academic tool and in 1995 made it something that all of us use today. And all of our early products, like mail, like news, like search, they were all daily habits. And that's our why. And we think about it each and every day. Next road rule, focus on people first and foremost. I have a very kind of cheeky saying that I won't use. I'll abbreviate it. My PR partner who's here has told me I'm not allowed to say it. I say no dudes, no divas. Dudes is usually something else. But I'll leave it to you to find former speeches of mine. Begins with a D. At the end of the day, life is too short, and it doesn't matter how well someone can code and how smart they are. If you work with someone whose values that you do not respect, it will not succeed. Again, at Yahoo, no programmers, no cynicism. At the end of the day, cynical sarcasm is coward's humor. And I would suggest you run from people that have it. Optimism right now, quite frankly, needs to be on every CEO's resume. If you don't have it, you don't belong in entrepreneurialism. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be a realist. It doesn't mean you shouldn't readily admit failure. But it means you have to have a sense of the world where you basically think that the world is a good place. Because if you are an entrepreneur, sometimes the world seems kind of crappy. And so at Yahoo, what we did, which was sort of counterintuitive, everyone said, of course, when I got there, the first thing people said, are you going to change the logo? Which is sort of crazy. We did it later. It wasn't time to do marketing. It wasn't even time to fix the products yet. The first thing we did was we focused on people. We bought 20-some-odd startups, including Tumblr. And I'll put Tumblr aside because Tumblr runs as an independent company. But for the majority of these startups we bought because they had the best entrepreneurs, the best engineers in the world. And we immediately put them to work helping to build Yahoo's daily habits. And it's been transformational. Of my team, 75% of the people that report to me on that next direct layer are in either new roles or new to the company. And very soon after we got that team in place, we immediately went to work on product. And today, if you look at, and I'm going to put my merciless plug in, please, I'm begging you, if you do nothing else after my talk, download the new Yahoo Mail, download Flickr, and download the weather app. It'll blow your mind. Really, really good. And we went to work on products. And the Yahoo products today, or will be on December 30th, 2013, will look nothing like the products of 2012. But had we not focused on the right people, we wouldn't be here. And when I think about my time at Lockers, my last startup, that was something I didn't understand. We had a great idea. We had great funders. But I was not a technologist. And I stumbled repeatedly, hiring people that were excited about our company, but for the wrong reasons. They wanted to work with me. They wanted to work with John Doerr, who was on our board, or Greg Maffei, who was on our board. They loved the fact that we were well-funded. They loved the pedigree. But they weren't the best people for what we needed to do. And that was a problem, a big problem. So that's about people. And if you focus on people and then products, traffic and revenue will follow. I promise you. The next goal, or the next rule, make deposits into the cool jar. And so what's the cool jar? The cool jar is this phrase I've coined that is sort of this metaphorical receptacle for all the best, coolest pop culture ideas in the world. And most companies, quite frankly, take withdrawals from the cool jar. When you look at big companies, they do things like hiring they pay multi-million dollars for spokespeople, where you know that person doesn't care about that product to actually hawk it. That's a withdrawal from the cool jar. When Twitter created the tweet, that was a deposit into the cool jar. Nike's advertising was a deposit into the cool jar. Make your entrepreneurial effort a deposit into the cool jar. I get very, very worried and get scared when people actually describe their startup idea when they say, well, it's like Amazon meets PayPal meets Pinterest meets Square. Really? It's not something I would fund. I would counsel you not to work there. I would counsel you not to think. And that way, it goes back to rule number 1, which is, what's your why? That sounds like a reason to be acquired or a reason to be actually to have a nice exit. And that's not what it's all about. Oops, I think I went. Oh, yeah. All right. I work at a technology company. Can you tell? All right. Next rule, never refuse knowledge. This is a really hard one because we grow up thinking that the sign of, our professors have all the answers. Our parents seem to have all the answers. CEOs that we read about seem to have all the answers. Our VCs have all the answers. But you know what? They don't have all the answers. And a lot of times I like to say that experience is the enemy of innovation. Because that was a great lesson at Cornell. I worked at WVBR. I was the program director for the first 2 years. Shout out to VBRites in the audience. And what the heck? They were letting us run, and we were like kids, and we were running this commercial radio station. And we did some of the most innovative entrepreneurial things, and we had no idea that we couldn't do it. And therefore, we just did it. But the thing that I learned, beginning with Cornell, is that if you refuse knowledge, you're basically minimizing your success factors at all time. So who do you get knowledge from? Yes, they're from things like teachers and parents and mentors, but they're from friends. They're from people who hate your guts on Twitter. The better you do on your career, the more you have to basically Yahoo search yourself to feel humble. Notice I said Yahoo search myself. So never refuse knowledge. Never refuse it from your competitors. Never refuse it from your customers. And it doesn't mean you have to change your center compass, but it does mean you have to read it and you have to listen to it, which leads to my next point under this. Please be present in your conversations. There is nothing more scary than when I see an entrepreneur who is checking his or her phone when they're talking to someone that matters. And someone that matters a lot of times is a user or a customer. Forget that it's just bad manners and you were all raised better than that. It actually is stupid. You're depleting resources from what you could get in terms of things that could make your company or your endeavor better. Never outsource your core competencies. And you would be surprised at the largest companies and the smallest companies that do this. When I started Lockers, which would sort of rise or fall based on its ability to rapidly develop a set of software algorithms, we were so anxious to get going. We already had users within our first months, millions of users. It took off really rapidly, that we outsourced a lot of our software design to a firm in Belarus first and then in India. It's not that there aren't really capable engineers there. It's that that had to be a core competency of what we were doing. And it always put us behind. And it always undermined what we were trying to do. When I got to Yahoo, we were sending out, we do a lot of marketing. We make most of our revenue from advertising. And yet we were sending most of our marketing out to agencies to do the very things we were asking people to trust us for. Customer service. Why do we send customer service offshore when the knowledge that you get at the end of the day should be informing your products and your practices? So we've gone at Yahoo, which has been very, very sort of rapid change. We went from 85% outsourcing our customer service when I got there to 72% onshore in the US, en route to 90%. And that has just been a really transformational change, which is really exciting. Next rule, fight to stay small as you grow big. This is really hard. It's easy to stay small and to make decisions when it's 2 or 3 of you sitting in a room and having a conversation. Super easy. But somewhere, and I think like the vexing number is around 40 employees, or maybe it's when you get your A round and you feel like you have grown-up money as opposed to seed money or you're bootstrapping. You decide you need an org chart and you need titles. And I actually think titles on some level are like the Antichrist. They're a really bad thing. How many people in your life do you know that have done bad things or made stupid decisions in the quest to get a better title? When companies are in trouble and they can't afford to give more money to their employees, what do? They change people's titles. And it does a bunch of things. First of all, it creates artificial walls in between people that need to work together. It creates the notion that you can't learn from people, that there's a one-way flow of communication. And it actually starts to discourage people from just walking into a founder's office and saying, we're screwed, we're not looking at this. And those are the things that are make or break decisions over a period of time. So yes, I'm not saying you shouldn't have titles. We have titles at Yahoo. But I can tell you that we're a lot flatter than we were a year ago. And this is something that I think Marissa Meyer is exceptional at. We have embraced this notion of being the world's largest startup. And we make all of our key decisions within a week's period of time. We have an organization at Yahoo called PB&J, which stands for Process, Bureaucracies, and Jams, where all of our internal Yahoo, we call our employees Yahoos. It's very flattering. All Yahoos actually go and enter things that are preventing them to be nimble. And it could be that there's a speed bump in the parking lot. It could be that it takes 3 hours to onboard for a piece of software or training, and we eliminate those barriers. And in that way, we have made Yahoo a much smaller place. We feel like a lot of people come into Yahoo and on the halls right now, I think when I got there, we had about 147 to 200 proactive resumes that came over the transom a week. We have more than 12,000 today that come every week into Yahoo. And entrepreneurs come in and they say, wow, this is faster paced and more nimble than even my startup. So preserve that moment, preserve that spirit as you grow bigger and get larger. Admit your blind spots and find your seeing eye dogs. You absolutely want to understand what you're good at and what you're bad at, and we all have them. Entrepreneurs make 2 mistakes, and they're really bad mistakes when they don't know something. The first is to mystify it. So you think, it must be so complex that I can't do it. And so you wind up imbuing other people, whether it's other co-founders or, not co-founders, other employees that you may hire. It might be mentors, it may be venture capitalists, with almost blind, unchecked power. Because you're just like, I can't understand it. Oh, I don't even deal with it. This is what they do. Or they do the opposite, which is almost worse. If I don't do it, it must not be important. So they dismiss it. Both will kill you. They'll kill your endeavor. And so one of the things that's really important at the end of the day is for, first of all, you not to be afraid of any part of your business as an entrepreneur. Dive really deep. I remember buying the book, which is so bad, PHP for Dummies. And by the way, by the time I learned to code a table, all my engineers said, we don't code tables anymore, which was really the waste of like 2 long, very long weeks for me. But I can talk a pretty good game now when I'm talking to a Java engineer or I'm talking to a front-end engineer. I can speak somewhat dangerously about Ruby versus PHP. I can talk about tech stacks. I'm a history and government girl. I've spent my career in marketing and management consulting and advertising and brand building, but I had to dig deep. That you don't want me to code your site. But I learned late in the game in my second startup that the best hire I made was an engineer that tried not to make it more opaque, but that tried to make it more understandable for me as we went on. And that's something that I think, again, Marissa has done exceptionally well. She has surrounded herself on her executive team. Marissa is an extraordinary talent, a great product person, a great engineer. But she surrounded herself, whether it's in finance or mergers and acquisitions or in the revenue department or in marketing, with people that are dedicated to informing, educating, and working alongside of her. But she gets deep into the details. She was so involved with our logo change, not just because she was passionate about it, but because she never sort of shies away from going deep into something that impacts the future of Yahoo. Next to the last, focus on right decisions, not perfect ones. And this is really hard to do. If you spend too much time actually trying to search for the perfect decision, having engineers argue religiously about different types of architecture, actually worrying about, on the HR side, which health insurance department or program will scale with you as you grow from 2 people to 200. Stop it. It's about actually making a series of right decisions and making them really quickly, sequentially, day in and day out. And I guarantee you, the number one thing you should do as an entrepreneur is ask yourself and the people you trust, is this wrong? And if the answer is no, it's right, oh, but this could be right, pick one of the right decisions, put it behind you, and keep moving. The final exam principle. This is the notion most people think that at the end of the day, all great entrepreneurs, actually, it's about having the idea. But quite frankly, the idea is about 30% of it. So even if you have an amazing idea, you're going to change the world, you've actually found the cure to cancer. And even if you're incredibly lucky, you have the right venture partners, you have the right market conditions, you have the right people that have joined you, you still fail, bringing it back to a Cornell Blue Book. Do they still use Blue Books now? And they're like, no, you're really old. Dude, you're embarrassing yourself. You still have 50%. That's a failing grade. Because at the end of the day, 50% is execution. And that is what's really important. So even if I show this here, you pass. Even if you execute, the most important thing is to execute flawlessly. If I have a great idea and even no luck, let's assume I have no luck, I still pass. I can still move on to the next round. I graduate. And that's really important to know. And I think in many ways, when I look at the difference between success and failure with startups, execution is usually the thing that undermines those entrepreneurs. Okay, see, here's my fancy. Oh, there you go. I can get a 95% if you actually have a little luck. And then my last piece of advice is sleep. This is my Jerry Seinfeld, moment when I say, what's this about this zombie-like culture and no one's sleeping? Why do entrepreneurs think that's like hot? It's not. Basically, the less sleep you get, it's a known fact. I took Psych 101 with James Moss, and I learned in 1981, amidst 1,200 other young freshmen who were probably sleeping through that course, I learned that when you don't sleep, you're actually dumber. Your mental power is actually diminished. And there's no machismo in saying, oh yeah, you got 5 hours sleep? I got 2 hours 45. That is just ridiculous. You're going to get, it's just stupid. And that's not just speaking from a 50-year-old, 50-year-old oracle here. This is actually speaking as someone who has been that person who went through that. Please sleep. Please actually take the time to take care of yourself as you're an entrepreneur. Not only will you be able to go the distance, because entrepreneurialism, quite frankly, is a long marathon that consists of maybe 1 million short sprints, and they never let up. So there's no break. So if you don't sleep, if you don't relax and take care of yourself, you're not going to make it. And finally, enjoy the process. It's going to be the e-ticket ride at Disney that you go on time and time again. And anytime, I'm just savitt@yahoo-inc.com. Anytime, I'm here to answer questions. I'm happy. If you take my advice and never refuse knowledge, if you want some, I'll give it to you. You can flush it down the toilet, but I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Dr. You want to do a few questions?
Yeah, I think we have time for one or so. I know you have to get a plane, and we don't want to get in the way of that. So thank you so much. A couple of questions. I'll start. One of them was, so in a Renaissance, you need fresh ideas and perspective.
Yep.
But what do you do with the people with the old ideas and the old perspective?
It's a great question. I think actually one of the things that was most surprising about coming to Yahoo was the fact that there were so many people that wanted to embrace change and that were passionate. I think when you had a company that had gone through as much turmoil as Yahoo, you expect to come back, you expect to come to a place where people are zombie-like and demoralized, and the great people would have left. But you know what? The great people had actually stayed, because they're the people that felt most passionate about Yahoo as a daily habit. And so when we sort of reintroduced very early on our why, all of them started to address it, because all we did was to crystallize what they had known and what they had said all the time. Mm-hmm. And so what we did do, though, was we were very frank. We said sometimes when you've been through a period of turmoil and fatigue, as great as you are, it's okay to be tired, and then this may not be your gig, because at the end of the day, this is going to be the world's largest startup. Do you still have the energy about Yahoo and the mission that you've already had? And the overwhelming majority said yes. And I think that's probably been one of the most gratifying things, is the retention level of folks at Yahoo, the people that did stay, and what they've been able to contribute.
Mm-hmm. And I was watching the Twitter stream, and so many quotables and great insights. Thank you again for structuring this the way you did. One of the things that I know people were picking up on was the diving deep into details. And we've all heard stories of Steve Jobs going down to the copy room with a red pen and going through things. And you were talking about, don't be shy about diving into a detail or decision that you care deeply about in your business. How do you do that without micromanaging or making people feel like they're being stripped of their responsibility and ownership?
One of the famous, or not famous, but I would say the most frequent advice I give when I mentor someone is, have you listened today? You need to stop talking and you need to listen. So stop pitching, stop selling, which you have to do every day. You're on like a pitch, right? When you have a new idea or a startup. Sit down and listen. So the best way of doing it is to sit in a meeting with, if you're a marketer, sit in your engineering meeting. If you're an engineer, sit in your meeting with the people that are doing finance or marketing, and just listen. Mm-hmm. And say, hey, I feel really out of my league. Make me smarter. What's the one thing I need to know? And don't be afraid to ask really stupid questions. Like, stupid questions are never stupid. There are lots of times when sort of that naive question comes in, where someone looks really embarrassed and they say, I don't know why we're doing that. And that's a great moment.
Yeah, great. We have so many more questions, but I know you have to leave, and I don't want to be responsible for missing your flight.
I'm happy to answer on email or Twitter. And
Kathy,
whatever.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Kathy.
Thank you.